York, with all these great players and musicians and everywhere, one can lose confidence in their ability. I remember when I first opened the Tin Palace with Ted Kurson, I think Cecil McBee, like many bass players in New York, came by to hear me. And subsequent gigs also, you know, maybe kind of an intimidation, but whenever there's anyone new on the block, you know, people want to see who's playing. Well, it's always nice to be encouraged by a great player, someone that is your peer and comes up to you and says, nice job, because that's always encouraging. So one special moment for me was when I was playing at the Village Vanguard with Ted Kurson. I was in the kitchen during the break. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I felt these arms come around me and give me a big hug. And this person whispered in my ear, he said, I've been hearing all these great things about you, and they are true. And so I looked around to who was hugging me and saying this, and it was Charlie Mingus. And that was a huge, huge compliment for myself. And he came through for me a couple of other times. He befriended me and was a big encouragement in my early years back in New York. So I'm very grateful to him for this. Thank you, Charlie Mingus.
I remember doing a concert on the West Coast. Forget the group I had at the time. I think it was a duo or trio. And we were playing opposite Mingus. And I was in the dressing room prior to setup time. And Mingus and I were talking about the times that we had met in France, and when he had asked me to take his place in a recording session in Rome, and just reminiscing. And the producer of the show came in and says, hey, David, we need you to set up your bass and get ready for the performance. So I excused myself, and I went out and was busy taking care of my speaker. And all of a sudden I looked up, and there was Mingus walking out of the dressing room with my bass, with my acoustic bass, and they carried it for me and then handed it to me up on the stage. I took that as a big compliment. I found him to be a very thoughtful person for me. There's a lot of stories about Mingus, but the stories I have with him was always very, very supportive. It was a great moment. Yeah, I remember a time in New York when I was playing at the jazz club Boomers, which no longer exists. It was there in the 70s, 80s, I think part of the 90s. And it was a hangout for all the jazz musicians. And I was playing there with Ted Kurson. And we were having a little difficulty, I won't mention any names, with the drummer at that time. And Charles Mingus walked in the club and came right in the front row. And Ted used to work with Mingus's band when Eric Dolphy was also in the band, Danny Richmond, forget who else. Mingus, of course. Anyways, there's a little difficulty going on the bandstand with one of the members because of, I think, too much alcohol or drugs or something. And Ted was a little depressed. Mingus caught the vibe, and he says, Ted, play that tune, and he named a ballad. I think it's something that Ted had wrote. And Ted says, "Oh man," he says, "I don't think it's going to work right now." And Mingus says, "No, do it with David. It'll sound great with David. Just you and David." And I took that as a big compliment. And so we did. We played it as a duet, and it turned out really well. And I think Mingus said at the end, I told you so. A little story, you know, but an encouragement. You know, Mingus was came to my aid a few times.